Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call the City of Shelton Commission study session to order. First item on our agenda is for our weekly commission reports. And so, Commissioner Moore, did you have some activities?
It's a short week for me. I have the only official thing I'm doing this week is I am judging floats at the Forest Festival Parade with Commissioner Shetty from Mason County, so that will be very fun. And that's it, of course, for Forest Festival activities.
And Commissioner McDowell?
Well, I have a kind of a busy week. Tomorrow I'm going to be attending the Governor's Summit on Career Connect Learning at the PD at 10 o'clock. My briefing with Ryan, Railroad Avenue ribbon cutting at 4. Then Friday night I'll be heading over to the Olympic Regional Airport for the Olympia Master Builders fundraiser, and it's going to be an auction. So that will be fun. Saturday I'm going to be waving in the parade. Been practicing. And Sunday I will be attending the I will be attending the Mason Conservation District's Oakland Bay Day out at Bayshore, and they have they're going to have a prairie restoration tour, native plant walk, trivia, scavenger hunt, shellfish snacks, live music, and more. It's open to the public, so invite everyone to come to that. That should be fun. And I just have a comment to make. Craig, I was talking, this is for the Public Works Department, I was talking to a former state patrolman, and he told me to tell you, make sure you know, that what we did on Railroad is spot on. I want to let you know that. And that's from a state patrolman.
All right, and what I'm planning to do this week is on Wednesday, I'll be doing a ribbon cutting for the Squaxin. It's a reopening of the Squaxin Island Museum. That's on Wednesday. Okay, and on Thursday, I will be attending, along with the rest of us, I'm sure, the Railroad Avenue rededication ribbon cutting. Then on Friday night, possibly I will be going out to dinner with some Chinese businessmen who are in the area, and I will be talking to them about economic possibilities concerning Shelton and Mason County. And that's through the EDC. Then on Saturday, obviously, I will be having fun selling Forest Festival buttons, walking the streets. That's what I do. And so I usually sell about 20 in about 10 minutes. Just walk down and sell them, get that money to go into the fund there. And then I'll also be in the parade this Saturday. So that completes our weekly commission reports. Next is general public comment period. And we welcome anybody that wants to come and speak. We do have a 3-minute time limit, and so we respect everybody's right to respect our right to end their sentences fairly quickly towards the end of that time. So, first to speak will be
Mike Olson.
Mike Olson. I have a couple of questions and comments regarding activity that took place through code enforcement last week. And I was contacted by some of the neighbors who live on the north side of Alder between 2nd and 4th Street. And they were issued citation warnings for parking in the street. And if everybody knows, those are very narrow streets over there. That's probably one of the oldest neighborhoods in the city. The streets weren't made as wide as they are now. And, I've talked with Craig, and I know you guys are aware of it somewhat, and I'm sure it'll get figured out and handled. My comment is now that the code enforcement is turned over to the police, is that now going to become parking enforcement? I mean, I think there's a whole lot more things at issue in this city that could be addressed code enforcement-wise rather than parking in an area that's been this way for well over 80 years. I don't know if that's, somebody mandated him to do that or he just took that up on his own. I know you guys will figure that all out, but I just want to emphasize that I think that, code enforcement has always historically been more of not so much parking infraction stuff, but cleaning up the city, junk cars, things like that. And are we now switching away from that? Because I do a lot of work in this city. I've got a couple of projects going on. I drive around a lot of neighborhoods. And if the code enforcement guy needs some direction, I mean, I can point him to, rusted campers that are sitting around, people parking on sidewalks, all sorts of weird things going on. And I just hope that we're not moving in the direction of parking enforcement, if that's going to be the best use for code enforcement. That I just don't believe that that's a good use of his time and money, or our money and his time. That, especially in that neighborhood over there, I don't see an easy solution if you're going to spend money to put bump outs in. It's a small neighborhood, people kind of handle it. They don't need any money spent there, short of one-way streets maybe or something. But I just think that even that's going to be a real ball of worms for you guys to open up and figure out. But I just wanted to put that out there as far as what is the direction of code enforcement now? Is it now all going to be parking enforcement, or are we giving up on improving the neighborhoods of because we have ordinances for that also. Junky yards, unmowed weeds. Drive down any alley, you'll see a number of code enforcement problems. So anyway, that's my comment. I'd love to see some more action taken on code enforcement in the community. I think that if you talk to most realtors and builders and homeowners, that's one of the first things they look at is the condition of a neighborhood. And I don't believe parking is an issue there. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. And we had somebody else.
Forrest Cooper.
Thank you very much, Commission and City staff. Forrest Cooper, 409 West Railroad. Over the last 6 months, I have brought forward numerous serious safety concerns with provided data and illustrations to help the city remedy them. In the end, I have not been acknowledged as a legitimate source of data or have been told to fix it myself. As a respected Shelton building owner, business owner, homeowner, and volunteer who has done a lot for this city, I am frustrated with not only the lack of concern, but the blatant disregard for citizen input and thoughts. There seems to be a problem listening to anyone that might have a different perspective or possibly a better idea or insight than that of the city staff. Many of our citizens not only have great input, but the expertise in their field to back it up. We are a diverse community made up of people from many walks of life and career paths. I myself have education, training, and experience in visual communications, aesthetics, lighting, and business, just to name a few. There are also expert architects and folks experienced in finance and local government that have actively tried to contribute to the progress of our city and have been ignored. It's time to realize city staff and the city manager are not experts on everything, and the initial choice that at first may seem like a good idea might not be the best and definitely doesn't have to be the last. It's time to lift the clear plastic bag of perceived transparency that is suffocating our city and start not only listening but asking questions. It seems our current administration is more concerned with having less of a citizen-influenced commission and more of a commission-run city government, that they have forgotten the commission is made up of elected officials who are the voice of the citizens of Shelton. Over the past months, on several occasions, staff has presented limited information to the commission and have omitted concerns that might go against staff's agenda. Case in point, the traffic light removal at 4th and Railroad. Many citizens were concerned about staff's decision and attempted to make clear their thoughts, as to which staff and our city manager not only ignored those concerns, they were not even acknowledged or relayed to the city commission. Phrases from the staff like, quote, "We have received a lot of input," unquote, followed only by the positive input that supports their decisions, have been observed. If it doesn't support staff's agenda, it is either disregarded, ignored, or debunked, as we observed last week. That's not leadership, it's power. Most of you know that along with many other citizens, I am very passionate about this town and have worked tirelessly to bring a level of optimism to our struggling downtown. Well, after almost a decade of business, my optimism is wearing thin. Now you can take this statement as just a citizen venting their own frustrations, or each of you can try to help build the optimism back up in our community by realizing we're all in this together and everyone needs someone to lean on once in a while. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dallas Gunner.
Dallas.
Good afternoon. I want to reiterate a little bit about what Mike came up and said. I'm the house that they put the parking, one of the tickets on the car. First of all, the officer that put on the car wasn't very nice when he did it. I understand he slammed it under my windshield and said that's the way it is. I think that that needs to be addressed along with our parking, along with if it stays that way, where do my guests park? Where do I park? Because I have that parkway on two sides of my house. I don't have any place to park. So I don't think we need to tear out parkways. We've beautified our parkway. We put trees in it to make our area, our house look better. And, you know, we would like to get that addressed as possible, as soon as possible, so that we can figure out what we need to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments. Anybody else? Okay. Next is going to be a presentation. It's an action agenda item by our Public Works Director, Craig Gregory, and talking a little bit about the city's surplus assets.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. We have touched on this in the past. We also touched on it when you voted to contract with Mason County Garbage that they would be purchasing.
Excuse me one second. By the way, for everybody's information, there was no consent agenda today. There you go. You are next, and so I did want to put that in for the record, that we have no consent agenda today. Thank you.
This was addressed back when the commission voted to contract with Mason County Garbage that most of our assets would be sold to them, excluding the roll-off truck and a couple of pickups that we have. But for the most part, most of it would be sold to Mason County Garbage. So this resolution would be setting the public meeting that we need to have before we decide to sell off those utility assets. So we are asking for action today, and we are asking for action today and not just moving to the action agenda for next week, because we need 20 days to get through that, which with Mason County taking over our solid waste utility at the beginning of next month, it does not leave us much time to get through this. So we would like an extra week to get through this, and we would like to bring this back forward on the 19th of June.
This is an action agenda item, and so it also allows public input or comment concerning the sale of these assets. And so if anybody would like to talk about that specific issue, now would be the opportunity. Mr. Cooper wants to talk.
Thank you very much, Commission. Forrest Cooper, 409 West Railroad and 807 South 14th. I looked briefly through the this resolution that's in the packet there, and I noticed that the vehicles for getting the information out to the public seem very thin. I saw that the Mason County Journal was mentioned, along with flyers being posted around the Civic Center and things like that. I didn't see some of our news agencies like KMAS or iFiber. You might want to get it out there, but just another concept would be to maybe have an actual insert that goes in the bills for the ratepayers so that they have the opportunity to see and voice their opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, questions or comments for Craig Gregory? I think we're all aware of this, and I think it's a good idea to sell the excess surplus stuff, and so I don't have any other specific comments about that. So I would need a motion.
I will make that motion. I move to approve and sign Resolution 1101-0517, setting the public hearing for June 19th, 2017.
So is there a second on that motion? I would second that motion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay,
I'm opposed.
okay.
Forgot to oppose.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was so used to saying aye. So, and opposed is Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
So the motion passes. All right, now under business agenda here, we're going to have a discussion about our permit fees and our our scheduling. Before we go into that, I just wanted to make a statement to come out as to the public, is that every time anybody speaks at a meeting like this, I and my fellow commissioners, we all write notes down. And I take the sheet home and I think about what is said. So nothing that anybody says is completely unknown or not of any interest. I write everything down, and I talk to our city manager at my staff briefing about those things. So we thank you very much for your input. Now, we are going into a permit fee schedule study session here, and I will open this up to our city manager, Ryan Wheaton.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. A little over a year ago, you three voted on reducing permit fees. And at that time, so this conversation started January 4th, 2016, and culminated March 21st, 2016. You repeatedly discussed a one-year moratorium and a one-year reduction. We have just passed that one-year mark now, and we are bringing back some information to you to take a look. We will not have a recommendation today. The four of us have actually not talked about what a recommendation might be because we need some more information before we would be able to do that. But we wanted to bring back all the data that we have and some information that, having watched all 5 of the meetings where this was discussed last year, we think may be helpful in moving forward. So looking at the meetings last year, it was started, like I said, January 4th. There was a discussion of a one-year moratorium, initially on impact fees, water hookup charges, sewer connection charges, sewer requirements, sidewalk requirements for vacant residential lots in the city limits. We ended up with reductions in planning and a little heavier reductions in the public works utilities. So 30% reduction in planning, and that was made explicitly because we have a 70% contract with and our then building official, where we are under the contract, we need to pay him 70% of the fee at that point. And so the reduction there was 30%. The reduction to public works, estimated depending on what work's done, at about 72%. Some of those charges were cut all the way down to 0. So moving through those, we also brought forward some information to give you an idea. This is the first 12 months after the fee reductions went in place. So the top section, you will see the first 12 months with the new reduced rates. And that is from April of 2016 through March of 2017. And then below that, you see what those rates estimated would have been if the old rates were kept in place. After this was done, from what I can tell in the videos, there wasn't a specific guideline or goal put in place to monitor. So when this started in April, CED, Community Economic Development Department, put together a brief survey, and you see the results of that in the red, yellow, and green color right in the center. So all people coming in to apply for any type of permit were asked essentially how much the fee reductions had to do with their decision. And we got about a quarter to a third of respondents from the first 12 months. And of those, 73% of the folks said that the fee reductions either had little to do, or just had nothing to do with it, or they didn't know about them. You see 15% said that the fee reduction essentially was why they came to do the project. And then that yellow section between was that they had something to do with it. So what we used our estimate for, comparing the last 12 months, new fees and old fees, is we said if just the 73% of people that told us the fee reductions had nothing to do with them, if we had the old fees, we were assuming that those people would have still gone through with their permit fees. We made an estimate at the bottom, and you can see that we did have, and Mark will talk about this a little bit up to come, we did have an increase in the number of permits and the number of single-family homes and some other things that Mark will touch on. Overall revenue to the city, we feel that we were about $65,000 short of what we would have been had we left them in place, even with the reduction. In this case, the reduction of fees was bigger than the increase in people that indicated they were coming forward because of the fees. So that's the basic information we brought forward. Mark's going to talk about planning department building permits. Then Craig will talk about what things look like from public works, and they'll both talk about comparables as well as staff cost. Nola's going to start by discussing a little bit about what this reduction means when we look at finances. And at the end, we're going to ask a few questions that are listed in your briefing. And these questions are going to help us figure out what type of recommendation would be helpful for you guys moving forward.
So from a financial management perspective, the things that I think about when I'm looking at this situation is I look at long-term budgeting perspective and look for stability and what can we be doing in this arena to stabilize our budget. And I also look at, as far as sustainable business practices, are we doing something that we can maintain over a long period of time? One of the things to be aware of when you're looking at the revenue that's generated through this is that revenue comes into our general fund. And just to give you a perspective, general fund is where all of our property tax revenue comes in, our sales tax and our other general tax revenue comes in. But there's quite a number of service areas that all share in providing services for that revenue that comes in. And that includes the commission, legislative, it includes judicial, executive, financial services, records services, legal, central services, law enforcement, fire and EMS services, detention and correction, code enforcement, roads and streets, natural resources, animal control, building permits, plan reviews, planning and economic development, housing and property development, recreational services, libraries, spectator community events, cultural recreational facilities, community center, park facilities, and interfund payment for services. There are other specific funds that are set up separately just for water, for sewer, and those are two separate services and two separate funds. And the expenditures from those funds have to be paid for from revenue that's generated going into those funds. You also have solid waste, you have storm drainage, you have equipment maintenance and rental, you have the fireman's pension, you have the treasurer's trust, you have capital projects bond, which is just to pay bond debt, and you have tourism. So just to give you a general framework from a financial perspective, the thing to understand here is that whatever decision is made about these fees has a direct impact on our general fund because the services are provided from there. And that is, a lot of that revenue comes from either property taxes or sales taxes. One of the things to be aware of too with property taxes is that we are limited right now to a 1% increase in property taxes each year, regardless of how much property values may increase. Property values could go up 10%, but we are limited by law to only a 1% increase in property taxes. Right now, we are sitting at our cap of roughly $3.20, and the remaining 40 cents of that $3.60 total goes to library. So if property values go up 10% and we're limited to the 1% factor, that means that our rate per $1,000 of assessed value drops because of that 1% limiting factor. We're also limited by the implicit price deflator. And if you recall this year, that was actually below 1%. And the only reason we were able to get a 1% increase was because we do have a population of over 10,000. So we were able to pass a special needs resolution that allowed us to collect the difference between the IPD amount, which was 0.953, and the full 1%. So those are just some things to understand when we're thinking about community growth and what limiting factors we are dealing with when we're budgeting for general fund revenue. What else did I have? I think those were really the main things that I wanted to share with you to be thinking about.
Okay. Well, being relatively new in this position in community development as a department head, I think it's really important that we analyze our departments on a regular basis, including department efficiencies, workloads, task management, and fiscal responsibility. And part of that fiscal responsibility is looking at the revenue and our costs associated with providing services to our community. Being that building permit activity is a very large one within this department, it's something I've really drilled into a lot lately, and it's a timely conversation to have here today. We've actually looked at I believe this is included in your packet. It says comparable building permit and plan review fees with 5 other cities at the top of the page. So we looked at 5 other cities and their comparables for permit, building permits and plan review
Now, let me,
fees.
just for a point of clarification here, these are not the cities that I requested or wanted to see information about. I asked for Aberdeen, I asked for Centralia, and I asked for Port Orchard. And because comparing us in any way, shape, or form to Tumwater or Yelm doesn't, I don't see any correlation to our city in size and income to those cities. So we can look at this, we can study this, but all of our information about Yelm and Tumwater do not bear much resemblance to what I would be wanting to base my information on. So we can go forward with the way this is all presented, but in my world, we have had a history of kind of looking towards Olympia for some guidance, and they have an income level which is double or triple what we have in Shelton. So that's why I reached Aberdeen or Centralia, similar cities, similar distance away from the Olympia area. So in this, just to let you know, this is okay information, but I really wouldn't mind taking a look and seeing what Centralia. I know we have Chehalis here.
Chehalis is an actual comparable for the city.
Yeah.
So we looked at, you have 2 actual comparables that we use for other things. We have Chehalis and Port Orchard, and then we also looked at regional similar cities that are, so Aberdeen is nowhere near our population,
Right.
but when people consider us, a lot of times they consider Aberdeen. So what you have here are 2 actual city comparables and then 3 regional comparables
Right.
that are at different ends of the spectrum. When we look at the downside, we also want to look at the upside as well.
Right. Yeah, so I'm just kind of stating that from income level, comparing us to Tumwater or Yelm, I mean, I don't know, I don't get how that money and those kinds of cities relate to our discussion on building permit fees and hookups and things like that. Just because of so I don't, do you have an answer for, you know what I'm saying? They're much
The
higher.
valuations are listed over here, so the valuations are going to be the same if it's here or there.
We look strictly at the applicant coming in for a building permit and what would it cost them to come across the table with a similar valuation. So if you look at the chart at the top, you'll see the valuation, project valuation from $100,000 and $25,000 increments down to $200,000.
Which sheet are you looking at?
Building
It's in
permit
your
fees.
packet.
Okay.
On the left-hand side, first column, project valuation. So if somebody came to our counter today with a single-family residence that was valued at $200,000 for construction of that,
Right.
we have what today's current permit fee and plan review fee is. We have the average from other cities next to that, column to the right, the difference in yellow, and then you'll see the breakdown from each city.
Right.
So
I see, let me clarify this again. I understand your point. So if you're building a $100,000 house here, or you're building a $100,000 house there, income levels, it really doesn't make much difference. We're talking an apple to an apple. Is that, so it's based upon a $100,000 project?
we're looking at the cost to provide the services for permit fees. We're not looking at the value of, or how much the house is going to sell after it's built. We're looking
Right.
at staff time,
Right.
hard cost in association with providing the services here at the city compared to what it takes Aberdeen, Tumwater, Chehalis, Port Orchard, and Yelm to provide those same services.
So
Okay.
Shelton's current is 1148, Aberdeen's is 4,000, basically.
For a $100,000
Oh, for a
valuation
100,000,
house,
okay.
correct.
All right,
Yes.
I understand.
So, and then the row below that is what the city of Shelton was charging back prior to the fee reductions in early 2016. So you'll see the same valuation, and then the second column where it says Shelton Old, again, at a $100,000 house valuation, $1,640 would have been the total permit fee and plan review fee. Those are 2 separate fees that are basically lumped into a building permit. Up above at $100,000, the reduced rate would be $1,148. Currently, on average, $1,817 lower than those 5 other comparables. Under the old valuation or the old permit fees, it would be $1,325 under the comparables, the 5 comparable cities averaged together.
So we were already quite a bit lower than the average of the other cities.
With these comparables.
49% lower,
And that was
before
in-
you reduced the rates.
Okay, 49%.
Yeah. We were sitting, before you reduced the rates last year, our rates were 51% of these comparable cities. After you reduced the rates, our rates were 36% of these cities.
Okay.
But the difference is that our city was growing at 2 residential homes per year for 10 years, and the other cities weren't.
I can speak to that next if you like. if the
Absolutely.
building
Well,
permits.
whatever.
Okay, perfect. I've got information from 2010 to 2016. 2010, there was 404 total building permits submitted to the city. This is not on your
Not on the
spreadsheet.
sheet, yeah,
Yep.
okay.
18,
Let's go real slow.
You
'cause
bet.
it's very important. So let's go
and we'll
back.
provide this to you in writing.
Yeah, so
So-
why don't you just say that again?
So 2010, 404 total permits,
404 for Shelton,
correct, City of Shelton.
total.
18 single-family or duplex
Okay.
permits. That was our high water mark over the
Okay.
last 7 years.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Now, those total permits include re-roofs, replacement of windows, any alterations, decks, patios, garages, things like that. So that's why the 18 that I pulled out of were only single-family residences and duplexes, because that was the crutch of most of the conversation back from a year ago. through the years. I'll kind of fast forward, or do you want each number from 2010 to 2016? I can, so you
Well,
can write it down.
yeah, I
I'll
don't-
go through them individually. So
Okay.
2011,
Yeah.
482 total permits,
How many?
482,
Okay.
2 single-family or duplex.
Okay.
2012 was down to 375. 1 single-family or duplex. 2013 was 391 total permits. 2 single-family or duplex. And 2 multifamily. The Crossroads Housing Center is included in that as a separate category. 2014 was 353 permits.
How much?
353.
Okay.
And 2 single-family or duplex. 2015, 339. And 2 single-family or duplex. And 2016 is next at 372 permits and 10 single-family duplexes. So actual building department expenses,
One of the quick questions here, since I've just taken the time to write that all down. Year-to-date this year, 2017.
year-to-date 84.
84.
84 total.
Okay, year-to-date, okay. And single-family?
5
Five.
single-family
Okay.
duplex.
All right, year-to-date,
How many
2017.
single family?
5.
Okay.
Excuse me, that's through March, I'm sorry, because it was comparable through the...
January, February, March, 3 months.
January, February, March, sorry.
3 months. No, that's good.
We did have more single-family come in April and May. I believe we're up to 12 total this year, but we're trying to focus on the comparable for that price reduction. Again, some budget numbers here. So I'll go back to 2016. I'll start at 2016. And the actual building department expense budget was just over $199,000. Brought in just over $184,000 in revenue.
Which year was this again?
2016.
Okay.
Yeah, so the expense was 199K and we brought in.
184.
Okay.
Yeah. So difference of about $15,000 in revenue that the city was subsidizing through other means, not out of just permit revenue. If that 30% additional was just collected in 2016, we would have seen an increase of about $40,000 to offset that. From 2010 to 2015 weren't quite as rosy as that $15,000. In 2015, the department was subsidized by over $110,000.
Okay, so in 2015, our building department got back from the general fund 115,000, kind of?
110, just over 110.
Okay.
In 2014, it was 153,500.
Okay.
In 2013 was almost 92. It was 91,800.
What was 14 again?
14 was 152,500.
Okay.
2012 was 79,000, just over 79,000. And again, this is the amount that the general fund subsidized the building department. 2011 was just over 16,000. And 2010 was just over 54,000.
So actually, every year, the building department has been kind of subsidized by, we call it the general fund, is that kind?
From 2010 on.
But not to get too excited about this, because isn't that's kind of like not unusual that cities, that their building departments totally fund their activities? Do we know that
I
information?
can't speak to that at this point.
Yeah, I know back, this is 30 years back, but Mason County kind of went through a big question about the building department not funding itself and money coming in from the general fund to have to help with the building department. And I think are there other departments in the city that get funding back from the general fund to fund them? Almost all of them.
There are whole departments.
Yeah,
absolutely.
almost all of them. So, and the lowest was 2016. That was $15,000 difference.
And what was 2015?
110.
110.
So we're looking at the 2014, that's basically when the mill started being built, right?
No, 2016. It's SPI's permit.
Really?
Fees, yeah.
Okay.
So that's.
I was thinking it took longer.
No, that's
Okay.
that's certainly where we're seeing some benefit in the permit revenue. In 2016 was due to SPI, and then
Okay.
2013 was MTA. So those were the two biggest projects we've had: Mason Transit Community Center downtown. And
When did
SPI
Code
over
Pros
the last
start?
2 years. Pardon me?
Pros?
2015 is when our contract started with Code Pros for building official services. May of 15. I guess the last piece that I'd like to add here is just kind of an estimate where, again, these are budget numbers I was using as actual budget numbers for the past 7 years. Trying to do a little bit of forecasting now and looking at our budget coming up now that we're bringing on a building inspector on Thursday. It's a great day for our department. But we still have some contract services that are required for a building official. And then obviously front office staff, customer service, management of those things. And really that didn't take into consideration replacement of any vehicles, really not much materials or anything. Most of that building department budget is staff time, is salaries and benefits. And then looking at the estimated cost of just processing a permit, getting a permit through our department, just if it's a perfect permit, they come in, maybe engineered plans, they're stamped, they're ready to go. We're going to spend at least $2,000 just in staff time just to process that permit and get it through. And I'll tell you, in my brief time overseeing the building department, that's not very common. There typically is some revisions or some back and forth, and in helping out our permit applicants get through that process. Right now, our permits are taking at least 6 weeks to get out and processed. And my hope is that we can speed that up, certainly with somebody in-house. But it'll take a little bit of time to get up to speed and get to that point here in the future.
Fantastic.
That's it for me, unless you have any
Great,
questions. at
great
this point.
numbers, great work. You know, really, this all helps us extremely in looking at where we are and what we're doing. And
So Mark hit on a lot of the costs to actually get through the building permits, and obviously Public Works and Engineering have some work within that also that Mark hit on already. So I'm going to skip over the actual cost to our department. It's fairly minimal, but we do have some time within that. But talking about just the utilities at this point and the streets, we did the same comparables that Mark did, and the current rates, we are under the average of all of the current rates except for the traffic impact fee. And under the old rates, we were over on everything except for the water GFC, which we were under on a single-family resident hookup, 3/4 inch meter by about $1,861. But I think the bigger thing for me when I really got to looking at this was how much Public Works and the utilities were affected by this. If you go through and look at all of these numbers, the building department, when this was passed and went into these current rates, on a single-family residence, it is about $631 less than the old rate, but that's just for the building permit itself. But when you start looking at the utility from the application fee to the actual hookup, the water utility is about $8,300 less now than it was with the old rates. So we are bringing in every single family residence that comes in $8,300 less into the water department than we had previously. In the sewer department, actually, I'm sorry, that was yeah, water utility was $8,300 with the $1,500 connection fee also, which is rolled back to zero. That is done through the department right now. They do the actual physical connection, which we estimated to be about $1,500. And looking through the comparables in some other cities, there's a handful of them that do it with a contractor, the actual physical connection, and there's a handful of them that still do it in-house the way we do it right now. Sewer is a different story. Sewer is all contractor hookup. So everything from the main up to the clean out is provided by a contractor. We don't get involved whatsoever. So it's actual cost for that hookup, where it's hard to necessarily get a handle on what our actual costs are. It really depends on, for that hookup, if you're trenching across the street to get to the main to hook it up, or whether it's on the actual side of the road that you're making the connection to. So there's a bunch of different factors, but we averaged it out to be about $1,500 per connection. So for the water utility, it's almost $10,000 difference that we would be bringing in on a single-family residence
if you built one.
if you built one. We will hit on that in just a minute
Okay.
also.
So you said
since
the
you
water,
mentioned
what was
that.
the sewer? Because I wrote down 8,300. But now you-
And then a $1,500 connection fee
So you
also
talk-
brings the
plus
total
15,
to
okay.
almost $9,800.
Okay. All right, and then you were talking about the sewer?
The sewer, and I'll go through the totals here too, which might bring it into perspective a little more. Overall, for all of those, for the water department, under the old rates, for the time period we were talking about, was $106,000. under the current rates was about 43,000. Ended up being a difference of a little over $63,000, which is about 3% of the total rate revenue for the water department. And for sewer, under the old rates, it was 128,500. Under these current rates for the time period or fees, it was just over 55,000 with a difference of around $73,000 in total revenue from hookups for a single-family residence, just for that time period. So over the last year, up to May of this year, we had about a $73,000 loss in revenue in the sewer department and about a $63,500 loss in the water
How
department.
much in the water?
63.5,
Okay.
which was about 3% of total revenue and about 2% of total annual revenue in the sewer department. So when we really look at stabilizing our utility rates, the funding has to come from someplace. So if we're talking about trying to stabilize our rates and get them to a consistent level, without this funding, obviously eats into that. So if we're looking at continuing this, we're looking at probably needing a rate increase to keep up with these reductions at this point.
And to, just for the news media and whatnot, none of this was, you weren't in charge of bringing this forward on how this 50% cut, whether it came out of sewer, water, or permits, you guys weren't involved in that.
It didn't look like
We're all new.
And you weren't there either, right? And no, you weren't there?
No,
Vic-
I
just-
wasn't there.
Just us and Vicki?
Just us and
Yeah.
Vicki.
So, just to let everybody know, this isn't something you set up, you're explaining where we are, how it's
Yes.
going, what we're looking at, and whatnot, and numbers that kind of give us that indication.
looking back through the commission meetings that Ryan was mentioning earlier, that I think it was over 5 that this was actually decided, it did not look like the Public Works Department had much input in
Who got
what was
cut.
presented
Right,
to
and that's why I'm letting you off the
commission.
hook. I'm trying to give you, I wasn't there, I didn't do it, so.
I will take full responsibility for it to bring the numbers forward, and that's what we're doing today, I think, is trying to fix what we had brought
But
forward.
we
in
didn't
the
ask
past.
for any comparables back then when we,
It's true.
Well,
we didn't ask for any comparables.
Well, obviously, we were faced with 2 homes a year. What are we gonna do? Let's lower rates, and the results, from the building department standpoint, it was the lowest that the general fund had to fund back into the building department for 10 years. That was, I mean, the lowest loss, basically, because we had, sometimes where we had to put 150,000, 110,000. So that year, we did 15,000 from your department. Your department didn't get treated as well.
That is true.
And again, we, as politicians, we said, hey, give us an approximate 50% reduction here in permit fees and hookups and things like
Right.
that. And so, okay.
So the one final thing I have to touch on is your voters voted in the Transportation Improvement District,
Mhm.
which is bringing in money now to fix our streets. The one thing that we cut through these also was the traffic impact fee. And over the period of that 12 months that we were looking at, the total amount of reduction in the traffic impact fee was just over $52,000, which if you look at it again, just in percentages, it's about 13% of the overall money that we are bringing in through the TBD right now. So I think the voters told us they would like to improve streets. The issue that we've got when we bring in $52,000 less than what we were bringing in before is obviously we're not getting as much done. So
And that, no offense, that was never quite conveyed to us. When we talked about lowering permit fees and hookup fees, taking money out of streets improvement, this is the first time I've heard about that part.
not actually out of streets, out of the traffic
impact fee.
traffic
which
impact fee, well.
technically goes to capital projects with streets
Right.
and sidewalks.
Right.
So yes, if you look at it, it's not directly out of streets, but it is through the capital budget for streets.
Right.
So to go back to one thing that the mayor mentioned just a minute ago was if they were to build. There is another piece of this that we have seen a piece of is with these reduced fees, if a contractor were to come in and actually get their hookups and pay for the water service and sewer service, they can do that and then not build. They could sit on a lot for the next decade after paying these reduced rates and never come to mark and put in for a building permit. So now we would be looking at that 10 years from now and have no revenue from somebody coming in to put up a single-family residence or something larger.
So that's a loophole.
It is, and we have seen that in the past where we have had a builder or a property owner come in and pay for their connections. We go out, do the physical connection, set a water meter, and I know of a couple in particular that have been done for a while and are still sitting there.
Do we require actual service at the time that the meter is installed and the hookup is done?
No.
So it could just sit
It
there
can be-
bringing in no revenue whatsoever?
It can be extended to the property line, and then, like I said, a meter will be set for the water, and the sewer would just be capped off at a clean out.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So just from my past experience as being a builder, if you got a building permit, then it's only lasts for like 6 months or a year, and then you got to come back in, and if there's new things, new policies or fees, then you've got to redo those.
Correct.
That doesn't fall into this category.
No.
So I would like to change that.
Why wouldn't it fall into that category?
It's an actual physical connection. It's the way that it's always been done there. I think it is somewhat of a loophole that we have. Obviously, Mark has a mechanism to continue to push people along with their project.
Well, the work's done too.
The work is done.
So on this side, the work's actually done. If you do a building permit, the work's not done.
Right. So, and this is extremely good because you're very talented people and showing a lot of fine points and things on the way we did it kind of before that maybe we should have thought about a little bit harder on exactly how we were going to do that. I don't regret doing it because we were faced with 2 permits a year for 10 years. It did stimulate growth, and but I think that in that kind of a loophole kind of a situation, I think we ought to have a policy that does not allow that. So we ought to have something written in there to where, if you get this isn't a grandfathered in whatever. So I think that would be something I would bring back to staff on writing in our policy that loophole cannot be abused. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
You would have to put a timeline on it, right? You
Well,
have to put a timeline on it?
Well, I'm not sure
That-
what we would do because it's hooked up. So the 2 options would be you force them to use the service, build, I guess 3 options, or you take it away, which
It's kind of a
Which
big
would,
waste of money.
which would be
would
difficult.
double the
Yes.
cost.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm
We
not
can
sure.
take a
That
look
would
though to
be-
see.
Yeah, well, I'm
Yeah.
just saying that, yeah.
Or we can look at actually charging again.
Right.
Yeah, and maybe the point would be they
Yeah.
don't get a physical connection until they do put in for a building permit, but
Mm-hmm.
we'll take a look and see what
Well, I think that's,
options are
I
out
would,
there.
I would think that's a good idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mentioned before that we don't have a recommendation, and we sat
Right,
down
yeah.
a couple weeks ago to think about what the recommendation would be and didn't get anywhere, so we didn't actually have that conversation. On the last page of your yellow sheet, the briefing, we have a few questions that we're hoping to get direction on so that we can figure out which way you'd like us to look when we do this recommendation the next week or so. The first one is how much emphasis we should place on one side or another, whether that is covering the cost of producing permits or focusing what I heard last year, which was builders and customers wanting to pay a lowered amount. That would help us out quite a bit. Second one is thinking about from, especially from the building permit side, where we place emphasis, whether that is on faster permits or cheaper permits. We've focused on cheaper permits for a year. As Mark gets staffed up a little bit, we've looked at ways that we can increase or decrease the amount of time, but that does come at a cost, and Mark's adding a cost that hasn't been there for the last 2 years in bringing on a building inspector. And the last one is, I didn't hear during the conversations last year what report we would bring back to you after a year. So we need to know what success looks like for you three and how we should measure that moving forward, what data you'd like us to come forward with.
Absolutely. That's the way we probably should have done it in the beginning, to had a progress report and also took a look at these numbers. And, you know, there was some, you know, obviously from the city standpoint at that time, we were trying to, this wasn't just a financial on money coming in situation. It was a whole city morale, jumpstart our city, get some builders to start doing something. I mean, we were looking at other cities, you know, and nobody was building 2 homes a year. And I also wrote down that there were other factors that probably played into that other than just the economy. Okay, maybe that Shelton, when the recession hit, maybe most of the builders went out quicker from here to find other work in Port Orchard and Bremerton or Olympia or whatever, and that when the economy started picking up, they came back a little bit less than they would have because they'd already established new lines of income. I mean, you need income where you're going. So I think this is an excellent discussion, and it's something that I think we can take a look at for what we need to put into practice. And on when you begin and when you stop these things, is it 1 year? Is maybe this should be a 6-month process with the, you know, with progress reports every 3 months or whatever. But I do know that the other reason why we did this is many people, landlords, were moving out of the city because these water and sewer rates were so high. Building permits were so high for them. It just wasn't cost. When they wrote out, what's it going to cost me? It's going to cost me this amount for all these things. They were building in the county rather than the city. And that there were other reasons, just the financial reason. So
I guess what I would like to see as we look at this further is maybe some, and I don't know how we would do this, get those other factors documented. Like, do we have any idea how many people built in other areas because they felt it was too expensive here? And looking at the fees, it looks like it wasn't totally that it was cheaper to build in another area. It could be something else, because, you know, we have the fees right here, at least with those cities that we did the comparable to. I was very much against the fee reduction, and part of the reason was that I didn't feel like we got all the answers and that it was just kind of pushed through. And it seemed like it was something that we had a constant moving target onto, that if you look at the proposal, we kind of morphed from week to week into what was actually being suggested. So I guess my biggest request would be for actual numbers, actual documentation, and keeping in mind the fact that our citizens have voted in to increase their sales tax, and it seems really counterproductive to reduce the street transportation impacts and then have the citizens subsidize the work that needs done. No comment here.
this
At
is
this
good.
point.
It's all information. It's all good, you know. Sometimes you don't know where you're going until you do something, and then you kind of reflect and look at it. I personally think it was the right thing to do at the right time. We were hearing a lot from people that just said we could not afford to build in Shelton, and we did what we did, and that's where we are. Then we just have to think about what we want to do in the future. So, is that it?
That's all I have for you. That's all we have for you.
All right. Let me take a look at my other little. So it looks like at this time, if there's any other information from the city administrator.
That is it.
Okay? Our next meeting will be at 6 PM in the evening on June 5th. This meeting is adjourned.